last shot is called the Martini shot, even by people who don't drink martinis.
Well, first of all, through God, all things are possible, so jot that down.
This town needs an enema.
That shit is the Mad Notes, written by God herself and handed down to the greatest band in the world.
We'll do it live. Fuck it. Do it live.
All right, we are live. Everybody, welcome to the Martini Shot Hangout. I'm your host, Chris. This is my first live stream coming to you as a 40-year-old. I hit that milestone this last week. So as they say, age catches up with you. Not quite sure how to feel about it yet. Still bringing it in, but you know, the wife threw a nice party last night. Anyway, so we got some movie news to discuss. I'm here in Texas. We just wrapped up our biggest film/music festival, I guess you could say. I had someone who's joining me today. He was at the front line, so we could get his perspective on everything. He got to watch a lot of movies, talk about the good, the bad, the ugly, everything in between, and what the experience was like. So with that said, go ahead and actually smash that like button, share the show with your friend. Hit the notification bell because I'm live at 5 every Sunday. I've had some pretty cool creators on here, just like the one that we're going to talk to today. So without further ado, welcome a father, husband, movie critic, metalhead, a silky smooth voice. If he wasn't doing this, he could probably do some voiceover work. And a man who has puts everybody else to shame because he's mastered the YouTube thumbnail game. Without further ado, Cody Leach. How you doing, Cody?
I'm doing good. That was a hell of a resume. Keep going.
Yeah. Who doesn't like people just, glazing them a little bit before
there you go.
Things off.
There you go.
So I know that you were mentioning backstage that you had a pretty busy weekend. So how things going in your world, man?
They're good now. I've got the big video out the way. Every time I go to one of these film festivals, I end up kind of going balls out with the ranking. I like talking about the festival experience. I take a lot of B-roll while I'm there, and then especially the bigger festivals, I end up seeing a lot of movies. So this is one of the biggest rankings I've ever done. It's almost an hour and 48 minutes long, which even when I saw the runtime, I was like, this guy's nuts. What the hell is he talking about an hour and 48 minutes of this?
Yeah.
But yeah, that video's done. I posted it a couple of hours ago. I put a lot of work into it. I'm happy with it. So that was kind of like the big workload for the month. Now getting settled back into all the new releases. We got a decent amount of them coming out soon.
Yeah. I know you saw Death of a Unicorn at South by, right?
Mm-hmm. I did.
Yeah, I'm seeing that tomorrow. So, I know. How many movies did you end up seeing?
23 movies, and then the first 2 episodes of The Studio, that Seth Rogen Apple TV show.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that kicks off this week, if I'm not mistaken, right?
I believe so. Yeah, the 26th or the 28th. I think they dropped the first 2 episodes, and then one a week after that. Okay.
Yeah, and I think I saw you and Sean Chandler review. You both said the first 2 episodes were hysterical.
They were hilarious. Like I walked into it expecting it to be funny. I always really enjoyed Seth Rogen and everything, especially when he's in the writing side of things. But I was shocked at how funny it was. It's very much kind of celebrating and sending up just the movie industry and all if you're people like us that dive into the hows and the what's and the whens of how movies get made and what movies get canceled and what studio heads are making and mandating this and that. It's basically all sending that up. And it was just absolutely hilarious. Very smartly written, very satirical. And so the first 2 episodes were just like laughs from start to finish, which is a very rare thing for me to say, because I usually am the one saying comedy's all but dead nowadays. And I've watched either 4 or 5 episodes since then, because I had the screener for the whole season, and it just continues to get better. The best episode of the season I've seen so far wasn't even the first 2.
Yeah, I think Apple TV right now is silently killing it. Like pretty much all the shows that I've been watching there, I end up loving. There doesn't seem to be a lot of mediocre content like the Netflixes or the other streaming services. Apple seems to really be hitting them out of the park. But I think the problem is I think I saw that they're losing hand over fist money. And them in the big scope of things, I don't think that's a big deal. But their content
pennies.
Yeah, pennies. Yeah, pennies. Yeah.
Apple
Well, that's
TV
cool.
kind of feels like their little splurge project. I don't think that they
Right.
care about making a profit from that. I mean, they're like, Martin Scorsese wants to make what for how much? Yeah, sure, bring it over.
Yeah,
And so that it's kind of cool. You know, I don't know how
it
long they'll be
is.
able to keep it up, but yeah, everything that I've seen from them, and there's a lot that I haven't seen, has been great. I thought that Shrinking first season was great. I haven't seen the second one. Heard nothing but
Second one I
great
like
things about
better.
that.
Yeah.
Everybody seems to love Severance. I need to get on that.
Yeah,
Ted
awesome.
Lasso, same thing. So yeah, they're making a name for themselves.
Well, yeah. If you, I highly recommend Severance. It's kind of it's pretty cool because you know Ben Stiller is so involved in that project, and it's unlike anything he's ever done. It's It's just a really clean, crisp show, just from a visual aesthetic, but the content's awesome. And I know you've probably heard ad nauseum if you're on Twitter. I mean, people are posting about that every 5 seconds.
Yeah, I watched the first 3 episodes of the first season and really got into it, but then it's just one of those things where life took over and then months went by. So I definitely want to get back to it, but I love Ben Stiller as a writer, especially. I think he's one of the most underappreciated writers of all time. So seeing him kind of get out of his comfort zone and doing something different and hearing how well it's received, it's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, you know, we were talking backstage, you know, how one of the things I appreciate about you, and you said it's kind of a blessing and a curse, is, you know, your videos, you know, I review something that's real short. I look at yours and I'm like, damn, 26 minutes. I think you tweeted the other day, you got out of Snow White and you're like, I'm not even going to make a video. And then the next day I saw like a 30-minute video pop up of it.
Exactly.
So it's a pretty cool thing to see from your end, because every time I watch your videos, I'm like, damn, dude's got like, you could either make or break them. You know, you can break a movie just by going through it, and it's I think it's highly entertaining. You know, especially for someone who does this for a living.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Yeah, that was funny. I saw Snow White and I was like, nobody cares what I say about Snow White. I'm a 35-year-old guy, and then I just sat there on it and I was like, well, I care what I think, so fuck it. Let me just go ahead and make a video.
Yeah.
And then, I look at the runtime. I'm like, I had a lot to say.
Yeah,
okay,
you did.
cool.
You
And
did.
then
Yeah.
Not shockingly, because for some reason I do really well when I look irritated in my thumbnail. It's my #1 video of the last 12 videos I've put out. So
that's hilarious.
It works.
Yeah, that's I think I started watching some of your stuff a couple years back, and I think it was your thumbnail that garnered my attention, and they've only gotten better since then. I was like, dude, I was like, if there's one course that Cody could probably teach, it's how to make your thumbnails really pop as a movie reviewer.
Yeah, I appreciate it. It's been a learning curve. Some of the ones in the early time I had to like figure out color contrast, and then I started really doing that thing where I put like a little text thing to grab your attention, and sometimes it really pisses people off because they just they look at what I say there, they don't bother watching the video, they just react to that in the comment section, and you can always tell. But it's fun. It's a fun game.
It is, man. Yeah, it is. That I think that's the thing. Once you're doing YouTube for long enough, you realize what the game is. You know what the algorithm likes versus what they don't. What content of yours reaches more people than it doesn't. And you started out just doing like horror stuff, right? And I know that the horror community is pretty awesome, but you know it's pretty limited as well. So, what kind of shifted gears going towards just mainstream movies?
Yeah, I actually started my channel kind of wanting to do a little of everything, but that's really a hard way to start in YouTube, because you're kind of competing with everybody and you don't have like this distinct flavor to you. So I decided to review a horror series because it was around Halloween time, reviewed the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise, and that was the first time I really felt like a lot of engagement in the comment section, where like people really were into what I was saying, and there was a lot of back and forth, and I was like, damn, there's a community here. I've always loved horror, but I've always felt like the oddball who loves horror. Nobody that like in my school or anything ever wanted to talk about that. It was always whatever the blockbusters were. So that was like a really cool moment of discovery for me. I'm like, there's others like me out there. And so I really got into the horror stuff for a while, still reviewed other things, but it was predominantly horror a lot for the first number of years. And then especially after I went full time and really pushed myself to watch as many new releases as possible, start going to more film festivals, really get out of my comfort zone. I was a little nervous that I wouldn't be able to really branch out of it, because when you're known as the horror guy for so long, sometimes
you get typecast almost.
Yeah, they don't want to hear anything else. There's some channels out there that can't even talk about anything but one specific franchise that they're known for, and that would make me vomit. But luckily, luckily I've been able to succeed with that. Horror is still the bread and butter. That's still the stuff that succeeds the most, and I always know that, and I'll always embrace that. But I'm very lucky and grateful that a lot of my audience has followed me into branching out and covering all film, not just talking about the slasher film of the month.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's what's cool about your content is because you do put out such long videos, you're able to really like go through and dissect a movie. So I think because you are able to really hit on what the themes of the movie, talk about the technical aspects of the movie, the performances, yada, yada, yada. I think people are like, oh, well, he knows his shit, so I'm going to stick around.
I like to think so.
Yeah. I mean, I have a buddy. I've had him on here a couple times. He's mad. His YouTube's Mad Blood, but he basically all he talks about is horror. But he's starting to branch out a little bit, and he's like, man, it's hard for me to kind of get those feelers out there because all people expect from me is just horror based stuff. So, kudos to you for finding that niche and going on. So that brings me to my question. Like the movie review space seems to be kind of interesting, just as the movie industry in and of itself. How have you kind of seen the last couple of years going with this stuff? Because for me, like I got into it probably about 3-4 years ago, and I've seen it change drastically just since I started. And you've been doing this for like 8 years, so.
Yeah, the big thing that I've seen shift a lot, like when I came into it, it felt like, man, we're really late to the party. Like it would have been nice to be in the Chris Stuckman or the Jeremy Johns era, and we could have already been the top dogs. But it felt like we were late to the party, and then we kind of realized, me and the few people that I kind of started around the same time, a number of have kind of dropped off, but like mutual friend Sean Chandler has been there with me the whole time. So like that whole era, it kind of felt like we kind of carved our own little corner out, and we're really able to succeed with that. And the big thing that I've seen is that I don't really know exactly what the cause is, but it seems like there's not as much flavor out there for people like really loving certain things. It seems like a lot of channels out there kind of want to be known more for what they hate. And that's kind of become the big thing because that's what succeeds. That's what really gets the clicks on TikTok or anywhere else. And so luckily it's not, I don't think it's the majority. I think it's just kind of the loud minority, but that's the one where, we fight it all the time in the comment section where if you have a nuanced opinion, you're a fence sitter. If you didn't like something, you're supposed to say how trash this is. And that's what's expected of you. And, if you liked it, you're supposed to say how amazing and life-changing this is. That's what's expected of you. And everything in the middle is just like, people can't compute it. And so that's the big thing that I've felt like has been kind of the battle the last 4 or 5 years. It's kind of been the growing problem. It's not widespread, but it's the one that's the recurring issue where it's just like, this is an issue. This sucks. We need to get away from this.
Yeah, I've seen you on Twitter and a couple others who are bigger names like you, kind of going not going after people, but you get a lot of the same comments where it's just like, oh man, I used to love watching you, but all you do is just crap on everything now, and you're like, what, dude? I just gave this movie last week, my highest rating I can possibly give it. So it seems like people now, they just want it black and white because I think things are so polarizing between what's happening in real time. And then, Hollywood kind of did that shift where they were injecting a lot of how they truly felt about something. And then, YouTubers made their bread and butter just bashing that. Yep. So from what I've seen since I've gotten the game, it's like, you want to talk about a movie and you could even just say, hey, the movie was all right. I didn't love it. I didn't hate it. Here are the reasons why. And people will be like, well, you just don't know anything. Go back to watching Avengers 77. Yep. So I think you're right on the money with that. The nuance seems to be gone. And that's why when I'm like, damn, did you put out a 20 or, almost 30-minute video on Snow White? That's like, that probably is just littered with a ton of nuance about different things happening in that movie. But, you got some of the Disney shows out there that'll be like, well, man, I mean, it's, it was the most beautiful Disney movie ever made. And then other people that are like, this is a woke piece of trash, blah, blah, blah. And you're just like, listen, man, I'm a 35-year-old man going to see this movie. And if you want to watch one of the most out of pocket performances of the year, go watch it just for Gal Gadot's performance alone. That was my thing. I was like, that would be the only reason I'd go watch it again. People are shitting all over her, but I was like, dude, it was a choice. I'm not sure if it was the best thing or the worst thing in that movie.
Yeah, I actually enjoyed what she was doing, and
Yeah.
I just don't think the movie fit it, and I don't
No.
think that's her fault. Like, I think I was the only person that I've seen, not that I've been watching a ton of Snow White reviews, but
Right.
all I've seen is Gal Gadot's in a totally different movie. She sucked. She was horrible. She ruins this. She's hamming it up. And for me, I'm like, that's the director's fault because
Mhm.
most of her scenes are by herself, or she's just with Rachel Zegler. She's talking to the magic mirror. She's not interacting with the cast for most of the movie.
Right.
So if your entire rest of your cast is doing one thing and she's off in this other world, it's your job as a director to say, hey, tone down the camp a little bit. Like, I love what you're doing, but we're not exactly going for that. And I think her performance would be really fun in a slightly different Snow White film. So I'm right there with you.
Yeah, I think so. Like for me, it was almost like she was channeling like a late 80s, superhero villainess sort of thing. And I was having a blast watching it, but I know, that's just not going to work for everybody.
Yeah, I liked it. It was fun. You've never been so opinionated.
Yeah, exactly. So that brings me to my next thing. Like, how are you feeling about the state of movies these days? My buddy Sully, who's here. What's up, Sully? He told me, he was like, I thought 2024 is one of the worst years in recent memory of movies, and he watches a ton of stuff. And I was like, I kind of see that perspective. I thought 2023 was a stronger year. I know we had the writers and actor strike, which really, interfered with a lot of what came out this past year. But it is an interesting thing to see because, you got kids. So it's like my kids like to go to the movies. I like to take my kids to the movies, but I took them to see the Looney Tunes movie last week. And it was like, after I bought the tickets and after I got all the popcorn and candy and stuff. And, I even have the discount with Cinemark, and I'm still dropping almost, $100 just to take 3 kids to go watch a movie that nobody else went to go see. So I think that's a big problem. Cell phone usage in movies is just all of a sudden every movie I'm in now, it's just cell phones are everywhere. People are posting, scenes from movies all over Twitter for clicks and stuff. So I'm curious, I haven't heard you talk much about how you feel about the state of movies now. I mean, Sean had a pretty eloquent way of being nice, but also ripping it to shreds. So I was curious your perspective.
Yeah, I mean, it's been kind of an interesting thing for me because the last 3 years, which is where this kind of conversation has become more rampant about how the state of movies has really started to go down into the toilet. That's where I'm starting to experience more movies than ever. So for me, there's definitely a lot of trash out there. Every single year there is, even in the best years of film. Last year specifically was just like a full year of like every major blockbuster seeming to not measure up with the few exceptions. And it felt like we had like 2 a week. You could never even keep up, even for people like me that are at the theaters every single week. It was like, Jesus. But there's also some really good stuff out there. And for me, I just think like it's more of a shift of starting to find a lot of those hidden gems, starting to find things at film festivals, starting to find a lot of these cool indie projects, going to see the movies that are, 3rd or 4th in the list instead of the big blockbuster that came out that weekend. And I'm still having a lot of really great experiences at the movies. I'm just not relying on Disney and Warner Brothers and everybody to give that all to me. So it's kind of more of a scavenger hunt nowadays than it is just relying on whatever has the big commercials at the Super Bowl like we used to. And as far as the movie theater experience, like I've been saying for years, like I really don't know if we're ever going to get to a point where the theater industry dies. I know that's something that people have kind of been saying for a while, especially since COVID. Just like they have with physical media and everything else. It's like, oh, it's coming to the end. I just feel like the theater industry needs to innovate.
They do.
And, when I experienced the Alamo Draft House, I'm like, this is it. Like, this is the kind of thing, like, it doesn't need to be exactly this, but this is the kind of thing that will draw people back to the theater, because the old school of pay for your ticket, get some M&Ms and a soda that cost you $25. It's just people aren't willing to do that anymore because the studios have primed us, well, save that money and wait 3 weeks and you can just watch it at home. And that's only going to get worse, I think, unless the studio just really loses their ass financially and decides to put a full stop on that. And I think they're too gun shy now to even do that. They, as soon as the movie starts to lose money, they move up the streaming date instead of wondering why.
Like Companion or something.
Exactly. Companion, I mean, was my #1 movie of the year up until I went to the South by Southwest, and that movie was on streaming by the time I got out to the theater to do my reaction.
Yeah.
And so I just feel like they need to start innovating things, and whether it's offering more food or having a more premier experience or having specific theaters that are dedicated to that so that people that don't want to experience that at least have the option, or, you know, doing things where I always thought it'd be cool if you could start having something where they work together. And if you go to see a movie opening weekend, you can get like a voucher to get a discount on the digital streaming copy when it's available, or something like that, where you're kind of getting a compromise for both of those. Like there's so many ideas out there that I feel like consumers would definitely go towards, but I just don't see any of the theaters really doing anything. The only innovation that we've seen in the last 5 years is AMC taking a page out of MoviePass's book and saying, here's a card where you can go see as many movies as you want. But that's only AMC that I know of. Maybe Cinemark has something similar to that.
They got like they got a discount thing. I think you get like, you know, 1 ticket a month and it can roll over if you don't use it. I have that one because there's a Cinemark right next to me.
Exactly. But there's a lot of areas of the country where we don't have any of those brands. Like GTC, Georgia Theater Company, is what's near me. They don't have anything. They got like a $2 discount on a large drink and stuff like that, which helps, but it's not enough to draw you to the theater if you're not a psycho like me.
Yeah.
So I think that at some point there needs to be a hard conversation where they just realize, like, okay, times have changed forever. They're probably never going to go back to what they were pre-2020. What do we do? How do we change things instead of just buckling down and thinking people are just going to go back to the movies eventually for nostalgic reasons? They're just not.
Yeah. I agree with that. And I think one of the things that I've been talking with a few people on here is like, you got to make people miss movies again, you know, because I think AMC was talking. I read something, an article maybe a week or so ago, where they're saying they want to go back to having movies be in the theater for 90 days before they go to streaming, which I think that's 100% what they need to do. I was like, you need to build, especially for some of these smaller movies, like, you know, Companion made its money back, I think its first weekend or so. And then, you know, it didn't cost a lot of money, but then it was on streaming, 18 days, I think is what they said it took for it to go from the theater to streaming. And it's like,
it was less than a month.
You weren't even able to build up any word of mouth with that movie. It could have kept making money, you know, weekend after weekend. People were like, hey, you really got to go see this movie. But, you know, no one went to go see it the first weekend, and then a week or two later, they can just rent it from the comfort of their home, and they're going to be spending a fraction of what they'd spend if they went to the theater. I mean, that's definitely an issue. I think that's probably the biggest issue plaguing them. Like, you need to be able to find a way to build word of mouth from the movie, then make people miss the movie, and then release it, and then garner that word of mouth again and have it be successful on streaming. I think Christopher Nolan's really the only dude that I'm seeing doing that right now. Yeah,
I mean, I miss missing movies. Exactly. I remember back when I was a kid, there were sometimes a movie felt like it would take a year to come out on home video, and you would just be salivating like, I can't wait to experience that movie again. You go out day one, rent it, buy it, whatever. And nowadays, like, it's such a quick turnaround that it's kind of a rarity that I'll watch a movie in theaters, even if I love it, and then I'll turn around and watch it at home. Whenever it's released, I'll buy it or whatever, and then I kind of forget about it because within 2 months it's on my shelf. So you have that, and then I know you mentioned the cell phone thing, and I've been bitching about that forever because it just absolutely drives me nuts. I mean, like, you know, COVID, I think, made people feel like everywhere is their living room. And another thing that I experienced at Alamo Drafthouse, where they're so strict on those rules, where they literally have like bits and little media that they produce in front of the movie to make fun of everybody and like make you laugh at, like, we're not playing, we will kick you out of this theater.
Yeah, I've seen it happen too.
And I love that. And I've brought it up so many times where I'm like, theaters have to start taking that seriously and actually enforcing those rules that all of them say, but none of them actually enforce, unless you get off and leave the movie and go to the front and talk to the 17-year-old kid and have him go talk to the manager and then lead them back to the theater. And now you've missed the entire second act, and nobody's willing to do that. And so they need to have something, a call button or whatever, just like at Alamo, where if somebody's, and I've literally had this happen, where the worst theater experience I ever had, a woman in front of me was using her phone to Snapchat video all of the scare scenes in the movie Lights Out. So every time you get to a scene where you know there's going to be a jump scare, she'd pull her phone out, bright ass screen, and she's doing emojis and shit. And for when stuff like that happens, you need to be able to like get somebody in the theater and give them a warning or get them the hell out of there, because there's so many people that I talk to. They're like, I don't go to the movies anymore. I'll just wait till I'm at home because I hate people.
Yeah. Yeah, I've had similar conversations with a lot of my friends that don't do this. They're like, why would I spend $100 to go there and just have somebody on their phone the whole time, you know?
Yeah.
Or talking. I mean, what's so funny is we're in 2025 and I go to the movies and, you know, it's not every time, but it's more often than I would expect. You just hear people just sitting there chattering throughout the whole movie, and you're like, have we not you know, come to the realization that people hate listening to your conversation while they're trying to focus on the movie?
Oh yeah. My thing that I always see, it's like I'm cursed, is if I have somebody that's going to be that cell phone person, they bring it out the second the movie starts. They'll be behaved during the previews and the dancing M&Ms and all that stuff. And then the second you get like the Warner Brothers logo, I see somebody down there with a bright screen, and they always have the brightness up. Nobody's learned how to turn the shit down. And as soon as I'm like, oh, this person, I'm gonna hate them for the next 90 minutes, aren't I?
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's a problem. And I think when I had Sean on, I was like, I think maybe almost, you know, how they do at comedy clubs now, where they'll say, hey, give us your phone. We'll put it in a bag. There's like a little locker over here. If you need to use it, step out and go talk. I was like, that seems like a reasonable thing to do. But I was also like, I don't know how you'd institute that into a movie theater. But, you know,
people would lose their minds. Yeah, the people would lose their minds about it. Those of us that are like me and you that hate it would be like, oh, happily, here, take my cell phone.
Yeah, take it.
But most people would be Karens about it. Like, I still see people every once in a while. This has been a practice for, I mean, at least 6 or 7 years at this point, when they started having the reserved seating local to me, which I was saying for like a long time. I'm like, this is so stupid. Why don't we have this like everywhere else in the world, and every other event you pay for a ticket for? When they finally did it, I was so elated. I don't have to show up 3 hours early for the Avengers anymore. Yeah, and
try to hold seats for my friends who are going to show up right.
Yeah, or you get somebody that drapes the jacket across 6 seats. They're all in the bathroom. Yeah, I'm sure they are. But I still see people that bitch about that. Like, why do I have to choose my seat now? I should be able to choose it when I go in there. And I'm like, what is the difference? what are you bitching about? You suck.
Yeah, and you can see where people are sitting, and if you don't want to sit next to them, you can go somewhere else. Yeah, it's there's you damned if you do, damned if you don't, sort of thing, as far as that's concerned.
People hate change, even a good change.
That's the truth. So you were at South by Southwest. What was it? Not last week, right? And for a week and a half or something like that. So
yeah, it was about 9 days I was there.
Yeah, so give us, not a hour and 45-minute recap, but what was it like? Was this your first time at South by Southwest?
It was. I've been to Fantastic Fest 3 different times, but this is the first time I did South by. Our buddy Sean he did it last year, I think, for the first time. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but he saw a number of movies, and I was just getting curious about it, and so I've been like trying to do a lot more. So I applied for it, got approved, and I really enjoyed it. I was a little nervous about how long I was going to have to wait in lines, and the commuting back and forth to different theaters, how chaotic, how stressful it was going to be, because Fantastic Fest is all held at the Alamo Drafthouse all day long, the entire festival. And even that comes with its own bundle of stress trying to secure movie tickets. And so
I was don't they like basically oversell every movie?
The first year I was there, it was perfect. And that was the first year they had opened it back up since COVID. Mm-hmm. And that was kind of a bad first impression, because I was like, oh, this is so easy. And then every year after that, it's been a bloodbath. 9 a.m. the app goes live, and you go in and select the movies you want that day. But everybody else is doing it at the same time. So the site and the app always crashes, and it's a luck of the draw on whether or not you get what you want. And I was very nervous it was going to be something similar, with the added stress of commuting everywhere. So I paid for the premium badge. I upsold from the press badge. It was like $640. And that let me get a 2-day head start on all the movies. And I still had difficulty getting movies. But I actually really enjoyed the commuting side of it, which I was not expecting to. Like we were talking backstage, like I really liked being able to walk around downtown Austin and kind of get some fresh air between movies, and check out some of the local food spots. And it was just really nice. The weather was fantastic the entire week, which was interesting, because every time I've been in Texas, it's always really warm and muggy. And it was like cold one day where people were wearing hoodies, and it was kind of warm the other day, and it was nice and breezy most of it. So it was like the best weather I've ever had in Texas.
Yeah, that's Texas for sure.
Very much. And I also really enjoyed how South by Southwest is a multi-genre film festival, because I love horror and sci-fi and all that, but sometimes you do get a little burnout watching 24, 25 movies that are like the same types of films, same types of subgenres. So I like the fact that the whole time I was there was a little horror, there was a little comedy, there was a little action, a little drama, a little period piece. And so it was a very cool experience. It was one of the better film festival experiences I've had.
That's awesome, man. Yeah. Were there a lot of indie movies? Because I feel like this kind of circles back to what we were talking about earlier. I feel like right now it's kind of a pretty cool time for the indie movie. They seem to be kind of raising the stakes. Other studios are kind of coming out, releasing some smaller things here and there. And that actually kind of goes back to what we're talking about, movies, spending time in the theater. I think for the indie movie, having it in the theater one weekend and then on VOD the weekend after might actually be a good strategy, just for like those smaller movies that cost like, $1 million to make or something. That could be a pretty effective way. But so how do you feel about the indie market these days? Because I've been watching a lot of just like low key stuff no one's even talking about, and they're great movies. Like I just saw one this last week, the new John Leguizamo movie called Bob Trevino Likes It. It was fantastic.
Yeah, the indie stuff is very exciting because I grew up in a mindset of like the big blockbusters is what you watch, and everything else is probably boring. And, as a kid, it was whatever the new Matrix movie or the new terrible superhero movie at the time, that was what I wanted to watch. And as an adult, I'm pushed much more to where I actually like checking out the indie stuff more, because you just like my favorite movie the entire festival was Rivals of Amziah King, and like total indie film. Like you could tell, just filmmaker with this wild idea, happened to get Matthew McConaughey on board. And
I heard about this. Yeah,
totally a movie that like studios would never go near this in a billion years. And it was one of the best movie experiences I've ever had. And so those are the types of movies that I really value nowadays, where like even last year, or maybe it was the year before that, my number one movie of the year was The Iron Claw. And that's a movie that nobody would expect to be a movie that I loved, let alone put it number one. But it was just in a year, I think that was the year where it was all that really empty and disappointing blockbusters. In a year where it's like I've had so many movie experiences where I just failed to feel anything.
Right.
Like they're just not getting any emotion out of me. They're not really evoking anything out of me. And then I get a movie like that is like almost too emotional. And so that was one where I was like, oh my God, a film can actually make me feel something in 2023. This is awesome. So yeah, the indie stuff is most of the films that they play at South by Southwest, and these others, like you had The Accountant 2, you had Death of a Unicorn, The Studio, TV series, but still pretty mainstream stuff. I would say less than a fifth of what I saw I would consider to be mainstream.
Right.
And all the rest of it was like all these really kind of strappy little indie films. And that's the cool stuff, because you walk out and, most of these don't have distribution yet, and who knows when they will. I've seen films like the Toxic Avenger remake over 2 years ago that still hasn't been released.
I think you and Sean both saw that like a couple years ago, right?
We did. It was 2023. And so, yeah, it was sometimes you have those experiences where you get this awesome movie you're excited about, and then like everybody else has to wait 6 months, 9 months, a year and a half. And then finally it comes out and you're like, that's the one, go see it now. Those are the exciting ones for me, because, the Accountant 2 doesn't need my help to advertise it. Death of a Unicorn doesn't need my help to advertise it. But the Rivals of Amziah King, I don't know what kind of distribution, what kind of hype that's going to get. But like, people like me that have a following saying this is the best movie I've seen in a long time. I like feeling like I'm a part of some kind of journey of getting eyes on that movie.
Yeah, for sure. And I this past week I just saw the new have you seen the new Jonathan Majors movie, the Magazine Dreams?
I'm gonna probably see it tomorrow night, but I'm curious about it.
Yeah, I watched it last week, and that's, like you were saying, one of the, like, it's probably one of the best performances I've seen in the last 5 or so years. I mean, he's just incredible in the movie, but unfortunately he's just overshadowed by all the crap going on off screen. But when you're watching the movie, I was like, damn, dude, this is like Pumping Iron, the Arnold Schwarzenegger docudrama and Taxi Driver, just has that vibe the whole time. Real uneasy movie, but I mean, Jonathan Majors is just I mean, I was gobsmacked, just phenomenal. But that's cool. Like you can sit there and talk about it and say, look, this movie, regardless of what's going on outside of it, like that dude is just it's something else. You need to get your eyeballs on it.
Yeah, that's all I've heard. I mean, I remember whenever that whole thing with him first kind of came out and made the headlines. That was the big thing that a lot of people that had already seen it was saying. It was like, yeah, I know he's getting big mainstream stuff like Creed and the MCU, but like he was about to be like Oscar consideration.
Yeah.
And now that movie's going to be shelved. And now 2 years later, we're going to see it.
Yeah. No, I'm curious to see your thoughts on that movie. But yeah, I thought about this and then forgot to ask, but you got 2 kids. My oldest is 12 and she's really starting to get into like horror movies now. I think that's one thing that might actually really, I don't want to say save the industry, because I don't think it's as dire as a lot of people say, but when you're a little bit younger than me, but we grew up roughly around the same time. Like I remember growing up in school, all we talked about were basically comedy movies. Like, me and my buddies would quote comedy movies and stuff like that.
Adam Sandler and Jim Carrey.
Yeah. Jim Carrey, Will Ferrell, Adam Sandler, like even the Adam Sandler CD, that was like me and my buddies would always do the goat and shit like that. But with my daughter now, in their little TikTok generation, all the movies that they talk about at school are horror movies. So I'm like, there's something going on there. And I think with comedy movies, maybe, that's just been, I mean, it's like a faux pas now, like, 15 years or so is like the last good, like really, really solid comedy movie.
Yep.
And I'm like, man, if somebody were to just go out there, make a, companion level type comedy movie for $8 million, it'd probably do gangbusters, because people would actually go to the theater. There's nothing like watching a hilarious movie around a bunch of people at a movie theater, outside of going to a comedy club. So I don't know if you've noticed that. Have you noticed like any of your kids and stuff kind of really talking about horror movies? Like, I had my birthday party yesterday and a bunch of my friends with their kids were coming over and they're all talking about horror movies. So I think that's pretty cool to see from someone who does this so much. And, all I hear is how movies are dying, but I'm like, there's something there. There's something in the water.
Yeah. I mean, my kids wouldn't be the best litmus test for it, because I feel like they get all of that information from me. They hear so much of it from me that they don't even need, they probably don't even desire to look up TikTok or anything like that. But my middle daughter, oddly enough, she's kind of had like a little bit of like a cinephile phase here lately, which I've really enjoyed seeing. Where I don't know, I really don't try to let my kids be on TikTok and YouTube too much.
I don't do that either.
Their phones and stuff, but I'm sure they access it somehow. There's always a way.
Yeah, there's trends that happen and stuff.
Exactly. So whatever information she's gotten about like films that are getting hyped up or whatever, it's always funny to me to just like walk downstairs and see her. She's watching like Girl Interrupted, and then she's watching some movie from the 80s with Rob Lowe, and then she's watching Requiem for a Dream, and I'm like, not that one.
Yeah. You can't handle that one.
Yeah, exactly. So she's actually been like picking these random films, and Good Will Hunting and some other stuff, just like picking out all these little classics from the 80s through the 2000s. But I can tell you that like I totally see the TikTok wave with horror outside of my kids. I actually roomed with a number of horror TikTokers while I was at South by Southwest, and so I got to kind of peer into that world. But I'll scroll through TikTok here and there and see it, and TikTok is like built for that, because the way that the content is very short form, it's about like quick buzzwords, grab it, get a lot of hype. It's easier to do that with horror than any other genre, because all you got to do is be like, you're not ready to see this scene. And then they hint at, the bedroom scene from Terrifier 2 or something. And then everybody that sees that is now going off to rent Terrifier 2. And so it was very interesting to see, like, look at their content, have them talk about how they do it versus what I do, where all my stuff is, long form, dissection, analyzation, everything like that. And on TikTok, it's more so about grabbing attention quick, getting some hype for something, and using your platform to kind of like get the shortest form of thoughts out there that's going to grab the attention the quickest. And I think horror is just primed to do that more than every other genre, because certain movies are so out there and extreme and just batshit wild. Like, like a film like Together that we saw at South by Southwest. That was my number 2 movie.
About that. Yeah,
very much. It's a movie where you can very easily create hype about it without even saying anything. So it's just like, I don't even know how to describe this movie. Like it's it's a little body horror, it's a little cult horror, it's a little horror comedy, it's commentary on this. You guys aren't ready. End of TikTok. And now all of a sudden everybody's buzzed about Together.
Yeah. Yeah, that's cool. That's actually probably a pretty good perspective as far as that's concerned. Because I know last year, like my daughter and all her friends were like, Smile 2. That was just like the clique she was running around with. That was all they could talk about was Smile 2. And I was like,
yeah,
I enjoyed it a lot. I know a lot of people hated it, but I thought it was great. And I was like, that's, horror's onto something now. Whether the quality's starting to go down, I mean, that's debatable, but they're really onto something as far as they're not spending any, they're barely compared to, the Electric State, these movies are peanuts and they're all making their money back, and studios just keep greenlighting them because they're like, hey man, this movie's guaranteed to bring in some money.
Yeah, I think horror has been in the strongest state that it's been over the last couple of years, maybe in my entire lifetime, because it feels like the 80s were like its heyday, and they've been kind of trying to figure out how to get back that. And, ever since I've been alive in the 90s through the 2000s, we go through these little phases where, 90s was very much after Scream. It was like, let's do the teenage meta thing. Yeah. And then the 2000s was let's remake everything. And then it was, found footage was in there. And they had a little bit of a resurgence of demonic possession with some of the found footage, but also Conjuring and Insidious. And then zombies was everywhere because of Walking Dead. And so we've gone in and out of all these different little subgenre trends where that's the thing and nothing else really gets successful. And the last 3 to 4 years, it feels like all subgenres of horror are just booming right now. And it's been successful because of that, because you can have a horror movie or two every single month, and they're totally different. You can go see Companion, and then you'll go see Hard Eyes, and then you'll go see Together, and then you'll go see, some new Freddy movie, or, some new genre flick, some new Scream film that everybody's nostalgia for. And it's been really cool to see. And it especially for somebody that certainly benefits when horror is in a strong state. Yeah. It's been cool for me because it doesn't feel like I'm stuck just talking about the same couple of franchises. Like every movie, even if it doesn't really work for me, it's exciting to talk about for some reason.
I agree with that. Yeah, that's it. It is a cool, and it's fun for me to like share that stuff with my daughter, because I was like, I liked horror movies, but when I was your age, it was in the 90s, and so I was looking back watching Nightmare on Elm Street or like The Shining or something like that, and now I'm like, she the first one I showed her was Scream, the first Scream, and she was like, this is the greatest thing I've ever seen in my entire life. So, you gauge them. I have 2 other kids, and there's no chance they can handle it. And I just had her watch the first Final Destination to see how she could do, and she loved it. So, and I was like, yeah, this movie came out when I was a little bit older than you, but I remember seeing that when I was maybe like a freshman or something in high school. But yeah, no, that's cool, man. Do you get to? One question I did have for you though, like, so, you watch all this, you watch so much shit. Do you ever just watch anything without like, I need to review this in my head? Like, I just want to sit down, chill, and watch something that's not, I don't even want to talk about it. I just want to sit back and watch it.
That is the biggest casualty that I have endured since going full time. Oftentimes people ask the question, like, what's the negative with going full time on YouTube and talking about movies for a living? And that's it. It's that movies were always my escape. That was my wind down activity. That was something I did to relax and just kind of, exhale.
Yeah.
And
now it's your job.
Yeah, I kind of lost the ability to do that. Once in a while, I can kind of do it. But the problem that I have is that I'm just such a workhorse, and I'm always thinking ahead. I'm always like trying to get the most out of myself, that whenever I sit down and I actually have time to kill, where it's like I could just throw on Uncle Buck right now and just chill. My brain's like, but what could you be watching for work? What else could we be watching for a ranking? What episode of a TV series do we need to catch up on? And so sometimes that is a battle for me. So yeah, sometimes I'm able to watch something, and I do a thing where every single month I'll do like a recap of all the new releases that I watch, and I don't get the chance to review all of them. So sometimes I'll go watch a movie knowing full well I'm not going to fully review this. It's just going to be something I'll talk about briefly on that ranking, and I can kind of take a little bit of a step back and turn off some of the critic switches. But for the most part, yeah, that's a big difficulty with me. That
I was curious because I get that too. Like one of my things is like I always every other year I'd like to go back and watch Buffy. Like that was just the thing that was like really what got me into TV when I was younger, and I just have such such a nostalgia boner for it, I guess you could say. Like I just go back and I enjoy it. And then, you know, now with the critic thing in mind, I'll sit there and watch it and I go, God damn, like they do not write TV shows like this anymore. I was like, you know, yeah, there's a lot of filler episodes. I get it. You know, each season was 22 episodes, but I was like, man, they really, especially at that period in time, they knew how to write characters to where you almost became like friends with them. You know, you knew everything about them. And if they made a bad decision, it would disappoint you, you know, something like that. But then now I just went back and rewatched it and then made a YouTube video about it. And I was like, damn, like, I guess those days are gone.
Yep. Exactly. Yeah. The few things that I'll watch that just for pure enjoyment, talking to TV shows, my go-to is The King of Queens. Where I'll go through this every once in a while. Me and my wife have like 3 or 4 things that are like our go-tos for dinner time. And my kids even poke fun at us. They're like, oh, I guess we're in the King of Queens era now. And so like, we'll just start watching through that again, or like Survivor's a big one. Malcolm in the Middle, Boy Meets World. You know, a lot of these nostalgic shows, that's the closest that I get to being able to just turn my brain off and laugh at the same episode that I've laughed at for 10 years.
Yeah, that's hilarious. I actually do the same thing with my wife because my wife's just like she's funny, man. She's not a real big movie person at all, but she has her shows that she loves. And so, like, you know, when we're winding down after the kids are in bed or something, we'll put on an episode of Seinfeld or, you know, Always Sunny in Philadelphia or something and just sit back and laugh and just kind of use that as our escape. So yeah, that's funny. I guess I like minds and all that. So absolutely. I know that you're always you know, you got the metal background. What feeds into that? Because I'm a big metalhead myself.
My father. I mean, my father's kind of the roots to a lot of the things that I grew up just having a lot of passions for. So like he really got me into music and movies and certain things. Video games is the only big passion I have that did not come from him because he just never cared at all about those.
Yeah, my dad.
But yeah, he was always into rock and metal, and you know he's big into country too. Country never quite took with me.
Never did.
Yeah, exactly. So I used to listen to a lot of it. I always had a lot of stuff that I loved, but I was right there in that '90s era where like Britney Spears and NSYNC and everything like that was music, and so I was into that for my little phase. And I remember to this day, it's that song "It's Gonna Be Me" by NSYNC ruined it all. Because that was the first time as a kid where I realized like they're playing this song everywhere. They're playing it on MTV. Every time a commercial comes on, it's that song. I walk into 7-Eleven, they're playing the song. I hate this song and I hate pop music. What else is out there? And I made a pivot from NSYNC to Alice Cooper when I was 9 years old. And so from 9-10 years old onward, I've just been all rock and metal. I like a lot of the older stuff, like, you know, Judas Priest and Metallica and Iron Maiden and all that is, and then you have a lot of the modern bands. Like I loved Godsmack growing up and Alter Bridge and Stained and everything in that 2000s era.
Yeah, I was right there with you, man.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, that type of music, I've kind of struggled. Like it feels like rock and metal, unless I'm just really missing. Maybe it's the same situation like with the indie films where I got to do some more scavenger hunt work. But it feels like it's harder to find really exciting new music with rock and metal, where a lot of the big bands they're like quieter. They don't release as much, which know, the state of the music industry is a reason for that too. But yeah, I love music, and you know that was a big thing growing up. That was a big escape for me, just like movies were.
I agree. I'm in that same boat, and I look at rock nowadays kind of like the comedy film. Like it's not even like a genre anymore. But I mean, you still have the big bands. Like I'm a big Coyote and Cambria fan, so like you know they put out new stuff all the time, and they do one of the cooler things with their music where they tie it into like comic books, and they have an ongoing story for years and years and years. So that's fun. Like if you're a fan of their music and their fans are like hardcore fans. That could be a little bit of a thing sometimes, but no, I was curious. I was like, man, it's cool. Like I do the movie critic thing, but one of the things that drew me to you is that you're just like, I fucking love metal music. And I was like, hell yeah, dude, that's something I could totally gel with.
Absolutely. Yeah. I really enjoy, like I used to just be all about listening to albums and everything like that. And nowadays, like I don't listen to music as much, but I love going out to festivals or to concerts or whatever, just kind of getting that live experience. Like that's like my hit, if you will, when it comes to music more so nowadays. Like me and my dad are going out to, I think it's called Sonic Temple in Columbus, Ohio here next month in May. and it's going to have like I've become friends with Rob Zombie's bassist Blasco.
Oh, really?
To a really wild series of events, and so yeah, he invited me out there because he knows I've never been able to see Metallica, and they're Rob Zombie's playing with Alice Cooper the same night Metallica's playing, so I'm going to go out and experience that and maybe hang out backstage. And
so that's your first time seeing Metallica?
Yeah.
That's awesome, dude.
As much as of a Metallica fan as I am, it's just never worked out where it's either been the wrong time or been too far away or too expensive for nosebleeds or whatever. I actually, the closest I ever came was in 2020 when they were supposed to do Rockville, which is here at 4 hours south in Orlando. They moved it to Daytona Beach, but it used to be near Orlando. And I was like, oh my God, this is it. Like they're playing 2 different sets, 2 different nights. This is a hell of a first time. And then COVID happened. And so I had tickets for it. And then they basically said, like, we don't, this is when we didn't know if the world was ever going to go back to normal. And they're like, well, you can get a refund now, or you can hold on to it and we'll see what we do. And I was like, we'll just refund it. And, Metallica, even if we do get back to normal, they're not going to keep this. They're going to have something else going. And then they ended up keeping it. And I was like, damn, should have held on to it.
Yeah, that's funny. Actually, my daughter, I took her to her first concert, was Metallica. It was like a year and a half ago or something. Yeah, that was because she found out about Metallica through Stranger Things.
Of course,
Master of Puppets. And so she was real into that song. So I was like, look, the first concert I ever went to, my dad took me to see the Rolling Stones. I was like, your first concert is going to be Metallica. So that was like, my dad grew up listening to Rolling Stones. I grew up listening to Metallica. I'm going to take you to that. And she had a, for not knowing many of their songs, she had a really, really good time. So, but I was like, hey, that's something that you'll remember for the rest of your life.
Very cool. Yeah, it's always fun as a father, like picking what their first experience is going to be. It's like, I'm going to set you up for the rest of your life. I got to be very particular here. So like my first concert was Alice Cooper.
That's awesome.
And then my second one was Judas Priest and Anthrax. And then my third one was Alice Cooper. And my fourth one was Judas Priest and Queensryche. So that was like my bedrock. And then when my son, I guess technically his first concert was Adam Sandler. I don't really count that one because it's a totally different thing.
Like a comedy show almost.
Comedy music. Yeah. So I took him to that. But his first like music concert, I took him to Rockville a couple of years ago, and the big headliner that night was Pantera. And so for all intents and purposes, his first concert was Pantera, and he's been a Pantera fanatic ever since. So that's kind of a cool thing for me to like pick. It's almost like you're picking like your characteristics on like a video game character. You're about to start a new game. It's like you're going to be a Pantera fan. I'm just going to pick that.
And as a Dallasite, that makes my heart happy, because Pantera is like, everyone out here loves Pantera. Was it a few years ago, or was this the recent Pantera without Vinny?
The recent one without Vinny, the one with Zach Wilde and Charlie Benante, which of course, more so with Zach. Zach has a very specific style that's never completely going to feel like Dimebag, so it's never going to completely feel right. But it was pretty awesome. It was one of the best shows I've ever seen. Like, they had fire and shit. Like their whole logo was in flames, and Phil sounded great. And that's awesome. Zach was killing all the riffs in his own style, and so it was very cool, very like infectious crowd. That type of music's just got that groove to it where everybody's just jumping around. And he had never heard a Pantera song in his life at that point, so it was like that was his introduction. So it was very cool to just like awesome. Hear the opening riff of Cowboys from Hell and just look at him. It's like, here we go.
Yep. That's awesome, dude. That's a memory he won't forget. Neither will you. So that's really cool, man. Yeah, there's one guy, Hayden Center. He says every October they have a music fest in Austin called ACL. You'd love it. So yeah, I went to ACL a couple times. They're not mostly like metal, but yeah, I mean they have a bunch of really big bands that go there.
Yeah, there's a lot of those festivals that are like huge genre blenders. It's very strange. Like you'll have like Korn and Sabrina Carpenter like sharing a stage,
Yeah, that's funny. Yeah, ACL, I think the one I went to was like Eminem, and then it was like I can't remember what some like softcore lady band or something. You're just like, oh wow, they couldn't be more different, yet here we are.
Yeah.
Like, it's kind of like an Austin Coachella, I guess you could say.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I took my wife to the Love and Life Festival last year because she's a Post Malone fanatic, and that was the cheapest way I could get her in front of Post Malone. And it was a weird experience for me. Like, there's so much music that is so not my thing, but it was like, indie pop, and then you'd have like a country rap person come up, and then you've got Post Malone, and the only person that I was there for was Stevie Nicks, which was the second night, and that was awesome. But it was just such a weird experience where it's like I celebrate the fact that thousands of people are here enjoying so many genres of music, but this just feels strange no matter what.
Yeah, no matter what.
Whiplash. Yeah.
All right, well, let's shift things over. Let's talk a little bit of this.
Hey,
All right, let me share this camera real fast. This is I wanted to kick things off with this. I know you saw this. You probably have thoughts about this. It was kind of a tease to the old where are we at? To the old horror community. Let's see, add to stage. There we go. All right, cool. So yeah, so the Texas Chainsaw Massacre looks like it's revving up, but then so they teased all the horror fans with this. They're like, hey, we got this, and then JT Molnar, who did Strange Darling, is in talks to direct, and then old JT tweeted this. Don't believe everything you read. So, and I was like, man, that article came from Deadline. Like everybody was super excited. And then he tweets that. I mean, obviously that's still a little ambiguous. It's not really answering anything, but pretty much everyone was like, oh, so he's not directing this now. I'm Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I'm like the Tobe Hooper original, and even the second one. I mean, the second one's not the first, but I have just nostalgia. That's like a nostalgia bait movie for me. It's so ridiculous and hilarious at the same time. But when I saw this, I was like, dude, that seems like the perfect combination if you're going to reboot a series. So when I saw that, I was like, that's something we definitely need to talk about. So I was just seeing what your thoughts were on that.
Yeah, luckily I kind of got into it after he had kind of debunked it, so I didn't really get my hope raised too much.
You had no excitement built up right off the bat.
Yeah, and I always tend to take things with a grain of salt until I see something super official, even though Deadline should be official. But Texas Chainsaw is one of those franchises to me that is just, for some reason, it feels like they have to go the reboot route every new time. Film.
Yeah,
and, you have there's the only two movies consistently in that franchise back to back that feel like they're the same universe is the remake and then the prequel to the remake. Every other one is like you got the original. And then you have two that is technically a sequel, but it could not be more different.
Oh, yeah.
3 is its own thing. 4 is its own thing. You had Leatherface, that prequel that was its own thing, even though it's supposed to be canonical. You had the Texas Chainsaw 3D, that's its own thing. You had the Netflix one that came out, that's its own thing. And so to me, taking away the fact that he debunked it, if that had any kind of legitimacy to it, and hopefully it'll loop back around to having that, that is a perfect way to go, because it's like you're going to bring some legitimacy to it.
Yes.
Story wise, I don't know what the hell there is left to do with that franchise. Like Leatherface is a cool looking character, but I think they've squeezed about everything you can out of that, for better and worse. And so having a really cool, exciting new filmmaker like him, having somebody that's got a lot of heat behind him right now, like Glenn Powell. Yeah, that's one of the only ways I think you could legitimately get some real excitement behind a new Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie nowadays, because without that, it's just, it's another Texas Chainsaw movie. Even for horror fans, it's like, it's another one. Like, you know, the 22 one that we just got, I thought was okay, but a lot of people hated it, and it was basically just going back to basics of, let's just do a flat out splatterfest with Leatherface. Let's just give him a chainsaw, put a bus of people in front of him, and watch him actually give a chainsaw massacre for the first time, despite the title. And you would think that would be like the easiest, like low-hanging fruit way to get horror fans united, and it did anything but. Everybody was like, I like that. I hated that. So having some kind of legitimate actual storyteller behind it, whether it's JT or not, I think is the only thing left that you could possibly do.
Yeah, and I think I was excited when I saw JT Molnar, because I Strange Darling was one of my underrated gems of the past year. That movie kind of had a grindhouse feel to it. So I was like, if you could bring that grindhouse aesthetic to a new Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie, which is, the Tobe Hooper one is total grindhouse. just awesomeness. So if you could bring that feel to it, it could be like channeling that movie. But I'm one of those people with the Jessica Biel remake. I actually think that it was shit on horribly when it originally came out. But I feel like over the last few years anyway, people are starting to really appreciate that movie for what it was. And I liked it when I saw it, but I was maybe like 18 or something when it came out. So when I saw it the first time, I was like, damn, that movie was pretty solid. Kind of like a grungier, darker version of the original. So I don't know how you feel about that remake in particular. All the other ones, I mean, 2 is one of those just like so bad it's great movies, but the remake I thought was actually really solid.
The remake's always been my favorite, actually.
Really? Okay.
So yeah, it's been like a hot take for the longest time, but to your point, it's kind of cooled down slightly over the last couple of years.
Yeah.
I think it just got caught up in that thing where, movie fans and the movie community sometimes tend to latch on to an opinion, and everybody just kind of sings the same thing, whether they watch the movies or not.
Right.
And it came out during that time where remakes all suck was the thing that everybody agreed on.
Yeah.
And that could not be further from the truth for a number of remakes. There's some bad ones, but there's also some very, very good and underappreciated ones. And so I think here recently where we've started to get remakes and reboots again, with Halloween and, Scream to a certain extent, and Child's Play and Candyman, and they're all kind of having mixed reception because they're kind of getting pushed through the sieve of what modern horror is supposed to be. There's supposed to be some kind of commentary and, everything else. And people look back to the simpler time of the 2000s when it was just like, let's just make a cool fucking modern version of this movie.
Yeah.
And had mixed success with some of them, but Texas Chainsaw was one that I always felt was one of the more successful ones, where it's like, they did not go the grindhouse route. They did not go for any kind of commentary, which I've never quite picked up on, but Toby Hooper always says that his original film was like a commentary on Vietnam and everything else.
Right, yeah.
So I think they just stripped away all of that, and it was just like, let's just make a balls out, tough, scary horror movie with Leatherface. And I think they did that. I think they did a successful as hell job with that. They didn't just get a prequel after that because everybody hated it. So yeah, I love the remake. To me, that's always been my favorite, and I'm glad that some people are starting to come around on it. Maybe realize they were a little too harsh on it.
Yeah, I agree. Wasn't it Marcus Nispel who directed that?
Yeah, he directed that, and then he did the Friday the 13th remake, which I'm also very, very positive on, that a lot of people are not. And
I am too, actually. I didn't mind that one at all.
Yeah, that's the more confusing one to me.
Aesthetic, I guess, of Friday the 13th.
Yeah, the Friday the 13th hate was even more confusing for me than the Texas Chainsaw hate, because like I get some people trying to hold some kind of value to the grindhouse look, or maybe some kind of an art house feel to the original that nothing's ever going to touch. But Friday the 13th doesn't have any of that. I mean, none of them do. And so when you had the 2009 movie, they literally combined the story of the first 4 films and still felt light on story. Like, you know what I mean? So you had that. And the kills went all out. You had a fantastic Jason with Derek Mears. I really like that. I mean, the acting caliber of people having like Jared Padalecki and Hannah Baker in there, way better than most, if not all, of the classic Friday the 13th acting level. So that was one for me where I was just, all the common complaints against that film puzzled me. Jason never runs. I'm like, yes, he does. Jason doesn't take hostages. Well, it looked like his mom. Did you see the movie where he was fooled by a sweater? I don't think it's that far of a stretch. So many things about that film to this day just puzzles me, why some Friday the 13th fans despise it, where they'll put it at the bottom of a ranking in a franchise that, half of those movies are awful.
Goes to hell. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there a series that you feel like would benefit from a remake?
A remake,
or they've done it so much.
Nightmare on Elm Street. If we're going reboot, Nightmare on Elm Street is the one that we're all just waiting on. Like, what the hell? I've been waiting for a long time. I really don't know what the holdup is. Like, it genuinely felt like after Halloween 2018 blew up, like all the classics were coming back, and the only one that's missing is Freddy. And you don't hear a whisper out of it. There's not like, it's not like it's been stuck in development hell. It's not like they can't find a director or writer, or they can't find an actor that can measure up to Robert Englund. You just don't hear anything. And I don't know if that's just them keeping quiet about it, or if there's just legitimately no movement on it. I really don't know, but it's very puzzling, because I fear eventually all all hot streaks come to an end.
Yep.
And so I don't know how much longer we're going to be in this little golden age of horror where everything's booming. And I fear that by the time they figure out whatever new direction to take Freddy, it's going to be too late.
Yeah, I think you might be right. But how did you feel about the 2010 reboot? Because
Not a fan.
I hate that one, but I was talking to someone who was like trying to talk me into liking it now. I was like, I only saw it maybe once when it first came out. And I remember just because I grew up with the Nightmare movies, I was like, nah, that wasn't it for me. Jackie Earle Haley with the ADR voice and stuff, it just completely distracting. And he's not Robert Englund. He didn't have any of the charisma or the humor or any of that stuff. So, and then they went for it and made him a full on, pedo. So I was just like, what was it? Child. Yeah. Instead of a child killer, he was, they did the full on thing with it. And I was like, I didn't really care for it, but some people, it seems like that one's kind of starting to creep out a little bit where people are like, oh, it was kind of unfairly shit on, but I was, maybe I'll go back and watch it. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't see too much defense for that one. To me, that's the one where people are just like, it wasn't that bad.
Yeah, okay,
like,
yeah, that's
you're still kind of acknowledging that it's bad though. Like, are we really going to fight about this one? But yeah, that was, I had a really interesting little turn of events with that, so I was super excited for it, and was ready for a remake. And I was working at a skating rink at the time. It came out in 2010, so I was 20 years old. And the night this is when they did midnight showings still. The night that it released, we got off of work, and me and two other people that I worked with were like, let's go see the new Freddy movie. And so we went to midnight, saw it. I really liked it when I first saw it. Fast forward to the very next night, and we're closing up shop again, and my manager mentions like, oh, I think that new Freddy movie's out. I'd like to see that. And we're like, let's go. We'll go again. And so the very next night, saw it again and liked it a bit less, but I was like, it's still good. But, a couple of things bothered me. And then the very next day I was off of work. It was a Sunday, and I had totally forgotten about my dad. And my dad was like, hey, you want to go see that new Freddy movie? And I was like, fuck. Yeah, sounds awesome. And didn't want to tell him I'd already seen it twice. And by the time I walked out of the theater that third time, I was like, this movie sucks. I just kind of like lost all love for it. But I mean, I think that the director has some cool eye for visuals. He's a music video director. So some of the way that he visualizes the dream world was pretty neat.
Mm-hmm.
I think that Jackie Earle Haley was perfect as a casting. I just think that they went the wrong direction with his makeup and how the ADR and everything like that, how they visualized Freddy, I think undercuts a lot of what he could have brought to it. I actually shockingly think that they made a mistake sticking with Nancy. And they should have just killed Nancy off and stuck with, I forget the actress's name, but the blonde girl who played like the new version of Tina, because Rooney Mara was just awful in that movie. And she's a fantastic actor.
Is that who that was?
Katie Cassidy. Yes. So I think she was significantly better in that movie than Rooney Mara is, which is crazy because Rooney Mara, I think, has had like Oscar nominations.
Yeah, she's a great actor.
And she like flaunts the fact that she didn't care about that movie, which pisses me off. I'm like, well, why did you take the paycheck then? And you disrespected this character that we love. So won't get on that tangent. But the whole maybe Freddy was innocent thing, I don't think added anything to the movie.
Yeah.
And then eventually when, like you said, they take away the child killer aspect and they just focus on the other thing. Yeah. It's a very weird conversation to have out loud, but it's easier to root for a child killer than it is a diddler. And so like you take away the weird psychotic appeal of Freddy being the one that we're there to see. And so everything about it just felt totally misguided. And it's a shame too when you have modern day budgets and modern day technology and everything you're doing doesn't come close to looking as good as it did in 1984.
I know. I think one of the things I'm excited about with horror movies now is it seems like practical effects are really starting to rear their head back, and I am one that's just like, please do, with like The Substance, and it wasn't the best movie, but the werewolves movie, like the character design and stuff like that, I thought was just killer. So I was like, I want to see more of this. Like if we can stop CGIing every little thing, shooting everything on a green screen, then I think that's a positive thing for the industry.
Yeah,
especially
totally with you on that.
Yeah.
Totally
And so
with
like,
you on that.
it seems like body horror is going to be maybe the next kind of niche, especially after The Substance, getting all the accolades and whatnot. I'm still pissed that Demi Moore didn't walk away with the trophy, but Mikey Madison was great. That's no shade at her at all. I wanted to see a body horror movie with an aging Demi Moore, walk away with that. That would have been freaking awesome. And then you have David Cronenberg sitting back smoking a cigarette, being like, "Really? We're just now acknowledging this stuff, guys."
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm totally with you. Substance was a huge surprise, and that race for the Oscar really did feel like it was like 51-49, like it was so close.
It was close, yeah.
But I would have liked the story of Demi Moore winning a little bit more. Mikey Madison's going to continue to have an outstanding career, where Demi Moore feels like that was kind of like going to be her swan song.
Yeah.
And then, it kind of feeds into the whole message of the movie too. Like you have the aging actress that gets overshadowed by the literally somebody who's just starting her career.
Yeah. The parallels are uncanny.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And then in other news, and I'm not sure how you feel about this, but I'm actually kind of okay with it. They just canceled the Saw 11 movie. So I was like, with Saw 10, because I felt like that franchise was a mess for so long, with the last, at least, I don't know, 5 movies or so. There's so many of them. But then when I saw Saw 10, I had no expectations whatsoever. I was like, man, that last one was like, I thought it was the worst one, actually. And then that came out. No, Saw the one before that.
Oh, okay, yeah, 3D.
Was it? Yeah.
Oh, Spiral.
Yeah, the Chris Rock one. I couldn't stand that movie. And then so when Saw 10 came out, I was like, whatever, I'll go see it and get my thoughts about it. And then I came out and I was like, damn, I might put that up there with like the top 2. It was it really surprised me, and it had a nice arc for Tobin Bell's character. And I was like, if he walks out on the sunset with that, I'm totally cool with it. And then they right away, they're like, they greenlit Saw 11. And then now it looks like it's just not going to happen. And I, for one, like, I was disappointed a little bit, but at the same time, I'm like, you know what? I'm okay with that.
I'm very mixed emotions on it, because on one hand, I'm right there with you, where like I was there when Saw really blew up onto the scene, and I was watching it before everybody was talking about it. And so like, it was a wild thing to see a horror franchise turn into like the thing everybody was talking about every single October.
It became pop culture.
Yeah. And I think Saw is the, arguably the most iconic horror franchise that has, been born out of the last 15 years or so.
Yeah.
I was somebody that I really enjoyed the first 3 films. At the time, I've kind of softened and had more issues with them as time has gone on, but I really liked the first 3 films, and everything after 4 to 3D, I was like, I don't care. This has just gotten stupid at this point. It's just about the kills. And then I was really excited for Jigsaw. I thought Jigsaw was dead on arrival. Yeah, I was really excited for Spiral. I had a good time with Spiral, but it also felt like there was certain things in it that just didn't quite measure up. So again, like a series that was just like trying desperately to reboot itself.
Yeah.
And then when Saw X came around, I was the total naysayer. I was like, no, 3 strikes, you're out. I don't care. Like, it's cool that Tobin Bell seems to be the star finally after 10 movies. What a freaking revelation. But I just didn't care. And I saw it about like one night early at Fantastic Fest last year. And I was like, that might be the best Saw film. That was incredible. Like, I was so blown away, was so happy to eat my words. And so to the point of, if we're going to end on a high note like that, that's a good thing. I totally subscribe to that. And even the way, like, visually, it literally is him walking off into the sunset at the end of the movie. Like, that's cool. But the frustration is that they so deliberately left major things lingering with the Cecilia character, the villainous character in that was intended. And the writers even confirmed this at the Q&A. Like, we already have the next 2 movies mapped out. And now the thought that that's not going to happen, that's going to frustrate the hell out of me forever, because like, that's the one thing about Saw X that doesn't work without a companion film, is that the main villain of the film is just left there. And, she doesn't have to have any just desserts or anything. And she just gets to live on, even though she's caused all this death. And that's going to really frustrate the shit out of me. If
that's a good point.
What we're left with forever. So like, I don't know. It seems silly to me. Like, when you read about the reasons why it's not happening, it's like, how do you screw that up? How do you have a movie in a franchise that's been a mainstay in horror for the last decade plus, and you get a movie that has huge financial benefit, it has critical acclaim for the first time ever. All the fans are pretty much in unison saying it's one of, if not the best. Like, how do you have all of that and then you completely just fumble the ball after that because of your ego?
Yeah, no, that's actually a really good point. And it seems like, you know, they didn't have to, those movies were always, I think all of them were profitable. You know, they didn't spend any money on them. So I'm sure, like, I know that they just canceled it, but I'm sure that we're going to hear some rumbling soon about like, oh no, we found a way to do it. I don't know if Jigsaw will be a part of it, but it's like, how do you make a Saw movie if he's not? That's one of those series where I'm also like, I don't think they need to reboot it either with like anyone else, because Tobin Bell was just perfectly cast in that whole thing, even though, like you said, it took forever for him to become the main character in those damn movies.
Yeah, that's what I was reading, is that they were saying that it's probably going to be shopped around to places. And I know Blumhouse has probably already got checks sent their way in the mail. But they said, like, if they buy it, it's probably going to be a reboot. And I'm like, that would be the worst possible thing. Like, I don't know a single fan that wants this thing to start again after you had Saw X for that exact reason. Like, not that you couldn't recast Tobin Bell's role at some point, but after you get everybody on board of like, finally, he's the star. And then now you're going to try to introduce us to somebody else. Like, I think that's the worst timing to do something like that. Agreed,
100%. Yeah, and that's one of those franchises where I'm just like, you guys had it all, and then just want to. And that brings me to actually one of these points here. Let's share this guy right here, which I think is kind of interesting. Get your perspective on it. So Warner Brothers negotiating the sale of Coyote versus Acme, and it looks like the people that just the production company Catch Up Entertainment, I believe, that just bought the Day the Earth Blew Up, the Porky Pig Daffy Duck one. I don't know if you got a chance to see it, but I thought it was great, and my kids loved it.
I did not. I'm curious about it though.
Yeah, no, I thought it's a lot of fun. It doesn't overstay its welcome at all. Just, you know, pure Looney Tunes. So it looks like they're going to be the ones buying this for $50 million. So it brings me to like this kind of weird state that we're in, where it's just like studios have these massive things, and it looks like Warner Brothers altogether is basically just ditching Looney Tunes. Like Max is getting rid of all the Looney Tunes shows. They're like, oh no, we don't want to have kid-centric stuff anymore, but they're still keeping kids things. It doesn't make any sense. I don't know. David Zaslav is a whole conversation where if I have you on again, we could talk about it ad nauseum, because what that dude's doing over there, I'm just like, this is like antithesis of being successful. But I'm curious what you think about this, because I know I've talked to a couple people who were at the screening for this movie, and they said it's fantastic, and I'm like, it seems like a no-brainer, going to make a lot of money sort of movie. But yeah, no, I was curious on your perspective on this.
I'm really unsure about it, because like, on one hand, I heard a lot of the same reports that you did, that like the people that saw the test screen and said that it's unbelievably good, and everybody involved with it was so pissed when they realized it wasn't going to come out. And it was a big controversy, you know, following up right after Batgirl, where it just felt like WB was just like, movies were tax write-offs at this point.
That's all it is. We don't feel like paying our taxes, so we'll just go ahead. This is a loss.
And I get from a movie fan standpoint, you hear that once or especially twice, and you just start to have resentment towards a studio. But I don't know the honest marketability for the Looney Tunes. Like, I know the Looney Tunes feel like they're a mainstay in pop culture. They were huge before my time, and even as a kid, they were still big with Space Jam and everything like that. But I just don't know from I don't think that Warner Brothers might not have some data that says that this movie probably would have failed. And I think that because it's become a big story, it has more chance of succeeding. But the cynical side of me also would not be surprised if this thing is something that we all follow for 2 years and we're cheering for it and film Twitter's going nuts about it. And then somebody buys it, it goes in theaters and bombs. And because I tend to find that, I tend to find that people, especially on Twitter, film Twitter more specifically, really don't put their money where their mouths are. And so like, you'll have so many different things where like the common thing they always say is that, you know, like there's no original movies nowadays. And it's like, there's tons of original movies nowadays. You just don't go see any of them. You pre-order your ticket for Transformers 12 and you wait for that. And so that side of me, I hope the best for the movie, and I hope we do get a chance to see it. And I hope it's as good as everybody says that it is. And if it is, I hope the success matches that. But I won't be surprised at all if Warner Brothers is proven right when this thing comes out and Catch Up Entertainment really takes a loss, because like you have a movie out in theaters right now that's a litmus test, and like I'm glad to hear it's good, and I'm curious to check it out, but I don't know how much money that movie's actually making because I don't really hear many people talking about it.
Yeah.
And so like if this Looney Tunes movie is not killing it at the box office, why would you expect another one would? And so I really don't know. I really don't know.
Yeah, I think the only thing that this one has going, I'm outside of the points that you made, is there's some big stars attached to it. You know, the all animated one's just a Daffy Duck, Porky Pig movie. So I think
gotcha.
The appeal's not quite there, but you may be onto something, because I took my kids last week, and for right until the movie started, we were the only people in the theater, and it was opening weekend, and I was like, that's not a good sign. And then the only people that showed up to see it were like dudes that were in their 50s. So I was like, there's no kids in here besides the ones that I brought with me. So yeah, that's a bit of a concern for sure.
Yeah, Looney Tunes really hasn't had a whole lot over the last 20 years. Like I know I think the last thing that I knew that they did was that movie with Brendan Fraser, and I might be missing one, but like they were huge when
but that came out during COVID.
Yeah, exactly. So like they haven't really been as culturally relevant over the last 15 years or so to where a movie like this would get people excited that don't have just nostalgia from their childhood. And so this feels like a kid's movie that parents would like drag their kids to, like, come experience this with me, versus the other way where the kids are like, take me, please.
Let's go see it. Yeah. Well, what's funny is that's actually exactly what happened with me. I was like, hey, the new Looney Tunes movie out. I was like, let's go, guys. And my oldest was like, oh. And then they all walked out, just like they all walked out.
I have to go get a movie paid for.
And I get candy and a Slurpee for free. What?
Yeah.
What kind of world do I live in here, Dad?
Shut up.
Well, speaking of profit, so where's this guy right here? Okay, so we touched on it a little bit at the beginning, but it looks like, this headline from Hollywood Reporter says Snow White limps to alarming $43 million domestic opening, 87 mil globally. And in any other movie, you'd probably be like, oh, that sounds good. But I think the budget before marketing was what, $270 million, something like that.
It was huge.
43 million. Like, I mean, I knew the online hate, and just people hated this movie before it came out because of Rachel Zegler and all the chaos and nonsense going on behind the scenes there. But 43 million for like the movie that for a story that put Disney on the map, like that actually is pretty shocking to me. Like parents didn't even want to take their kids to go see this movie. So that's pretty astounding.
Yeah, I mean, this one, Snow White is kind of an oddball where it has this magnificent legacy.
Yeah.
But it's the one that paved the way for all the much better movies, in my opinion. I don't know if that's controversial to say, but like most times when you have a movie that started it all, it's very quickly overshadowed by all the movies that kind of took everything to the next level. And so I think Disney already kind of pushed through all their most marketable names. Like they got The Lion King out there twice. They got Aladdin out there. They got Little Mermaid out there. Snow White kind of felt like the one that's more classic and it isn't necessarily as exciting as some of the other ones. And so I never really had a whole lot of faith in this movie, even before the controversy. And I don't think it was an accident that it's like one of the last ones that they're attempting when they're, getting out all the real flashy ones first. And I mean, the controversy, I'm sure, had a decent sized chunk out of that. But I also know that the reality is most regular people don't even know about half of that stuff. They just see a Snow White movie and they take their kids to it. And I don't know. I think that the point that I really tried to hammer home in my review is that I think just collectively as a movie going audience, I think we're just tired of the Disney live action remakes or the live action remakes, because many of them have just been okay. I think that Aladdin was great. I think that Jungle Book was great. I've always heard Cinderella was great, but I've never seen it. The rest of them have been decent to bad. And I think that after so many of them, they're marketing to people like us that grew up with these movies. And after you have your nostalgia repaid with a mediocre movie enough times, you're just like, no, I'll just, if I want to watch Snow White, I'll go watch the original. And I think that's the point that we are, where, Disney has they've had their little heyday where they made billions of dollars off of that, and now people are kind of tired of it. And we got Lilo and Stitch coming out that's a little more exciting because it's something.
I think that one
unique.
I think that one actually might eat Snow White's lunch as far as the box office is concerned, because I think people looked at this and they go, this looks like just like a shot for shot remake of the cartoon. You know, it seemed fun, and it's almost like they learned a lesson. Disney learned their lesson by trying to reboot these things and kind of put a different spin on it, and people are bringing their kids are just like, this isn't the same movie that we grew up watching, so we're just going to go back and watch the original. So yeah, I think that's just from what I'm garnering, at least from like, you know, film Twitter and stuff. People seem to be pretty excited about the Lilo and Stitch movie.
Yeah, and I felt the same thing. And you're probably still going to have some people that are just going to be like, no, I'll just watch the animated one. This looks like the exact same thing. But yeah, I do think that there's a certain amount of that too. Like I've never gotten too up in arms with stuff that Disney has done, but we've seen a wave of media where, you know, for 4 to 6 years, it's felt like, especially at Disney, where we're trying to like inject certain things that were never there and make that the point of the movie and change this character and try to get this commentary in there. And, you know, certain ones work better than others, but I also feel like we're also kind of reaching our exhaustion point with that, even if it's a message you agree with, where people are just like, I just want to be entertained. Yeah. And that was taboo to say for a while, where they're like, well, movies always, you know, and it's like, no, not all of them. Sometimes you just go because you want to see a mermaid fall in love. That's all you want to see. You don't want to hear about anything else. Nothing else. I think that a good amount of the movie going audience are kind of reaching their exhaustion point of that too. And I think Disney, they're not going to be as outspoken about it as maybe some other companies, where they're going to actually announce that they're backing off of that. But I think quietly they're going to be like, okay, let's not do anything to Lilo and Stitch and see what happens.
I agree.
And if that blows up, then maybe we pause and pump the brakes on that a little bit and start making money again. Because companies, no matter how moral they try to act, and Disney's one of the worst, is like, we're going to police the morality of all of our fans. Their profit first. So if morality starts to have a negative bottom line, they're going to change it.
Right. If morality's not making them any money, then they're going to try to go the path it is. So I mean,
absolutely. That's why I always find it funny when you have people that, like, I think Target was one where people were like, Target's the best because they're doing this. And then Target very quickly pivots because they're losing money. And it's like, they're a corporation. Did you really think they cared? Like, that's cute.
And you guys that are whining about it aren't buying any of their stuff anyways.
Yes, exactly.
Yep. And then I got a couple more things here. So I think I saw you tweet about this, but I'm curious. What's that?
I tweeted a couple times.
Yeah. So the Resident Evil movies, I wish I love the games, and I haven't liked anything they've put out. I know I'm not alone in there, but there's some people that, you know, have nostalgia for the original Paul W.S. Anderson movie, and I never was a huge fan of it just because I liked the game so much beforehand. But this one I'm oddly optimistic for. I don't know. You don't seem to be, from what I've read from your tweets, but I may, you know, obviously tone isn't necessarily there, but they just cast this dude and I like Zach Krager a lot. So I think there's some serious potential here, but we all know how this goes. So I was just curious if you wanted to maybe elaborate on that a little bit and see, you know, kind of where the meter's pointing nowadays as far as this movie's concerned.
Resident Evil is like Dexter for me, where I'm like that battered wife where the husband's promising me I'm not going to get hit again, and he really loves me and he's changed.
Right.
So that's kind of my stance with it. I'm cautiously optimistic. Okay. I think Zach Krager's, you know, just seeing Barbarian, I think that his style, if he just transfers exactly what he did from Barbarian over to Resident Evil, to me, that's perfect. So I'm optimistic about that. What I'm worried about is the language that you have in the announcement, where like it's going to be inspired by the games. And for me, the collective thing that all of the bad and mediocre video game adaptations have in common is that they're just inspired by the games rather than actually directly adapting them. And you have something like The Last of Us, which I think was phenomenal. I don't know if you like it or not.
Loved it.
So, most people tend to agree that's probably the best video game adaptation we've ever gotten. And what is the main thing that is a draw for it? It is literally a direct adaptation of the game with very few changes. And so for me, my worry is that this is yet another Resident Evil movie that's going to have a lot of promise, but then you're going to get into it and it's just going to be like, this character's kind of like Leon, and this is kind of like the story of the first game with bits of this, and we're telling our own story. And we've done this so many times now. Like you had the Paul W.S. Anderson movies, which I'm one of those guys. I have a little bit of nostalgia for them, but they're guilty pleasures, absolute guilty pleasures. Some of them suck, but there's like 3 or 4 of them that I enjoy for that were just totally their own thing and just cherry picking details from all the games. Then you had Welcome to Raccoon City, which I was really excited about, and I enjoyed it, but they tried to do too much in one movie.
Yeah.
Like they were nailing certain things about the first game. They were nailing certain things about the second game, but they cannibalized each other in the same movie. And so it ended up being a little disappointing. Then you had that Resident Evil Netflix show.
Yeah, that was the worst.
Totally its own thing. And, you know, it had Lance Reddick, who I love. That was the best thing about it. But it's like, at what point do we start to have that definition of insanity play into it, where it's like, how many times are we just going to be inspired by Resident Evil, just directly adapt the first game and see how successful that thing is?
That's a great point.
Just whether it's a movie or a series. Like, I think a lot of video games are going to lend themselves better to television series. That's why Last of Us had so much room to be amazing. You know, like, don't ever try to do a Metal Gear Solid movie.
Yeah.
But Resident Evil,
I thought Fallout was great too. I don't know if you got a chance to check that out.
I haven't. I watched the first episode, and then just like with Severance, life took over. Really enjoyed the first episode, so I'm gonna catch back up on it. But yeah, to me, that's what I'm worried about. Is like, you're yet again gonna set up with like a director who seems perfect, probably gonna have some really fun casting announcements. You're gonna get us excited, but what story are you telling that you have the arrogance to think is gonna be better than this game that we have beloved for 30 years?
It's a great point. Yeah. So I guess it's one of those we'll wait and see sort of situations there. All right. Well, I got one more story, and then we'll let you on your merry way. This one's kind of wild. I don't know if you caught wind of it at all, but there we go. So the guy who directed 47 Ronin, did you see this story at all?
I don't believe I have.
Okay, so his name's Carl Eric Rinch. He directed 47 Ronin. Did you see that with Keanu Reeves?
I did not, but I know what it's that kung fu movie with like RZA or something like that.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. It's a guilty pleasure. Like, I think on Rotten Tomatoes it has like just a criminally low score, but on IMDb it's relatively high. So it seems like people liked it, critics hated it, but it's guilty pleasure for me, like we were just talking about. So apparently, Netflix threw a bunch of money at this dude, and to make a series. It was going to be like some sci-fi adaptation, and he apparently they gave him a budget of $44 million to film a show which depicts artificial human clones, but he never completed one single episode. So then in 2020 he asked for another 11 million. They gave it to him, and basically what he did is he just took the money himself and was buying Porsches and Ferraris and Bentleys and like furniture, and essentially didn't shoot 1 second of this show, and is just getting reamed over for, obviously he got charged with defrauding $11 million. Like the feds got involved in it. So yeah, it's a whole ugly story, but it's one of those things where I don't feel like enough people have heard about it because it just, there you go. Danny Dorito 23 just chimed in. He said, this story's wild. But I can read a little bit more into it too. So he allegedly used the remaining funds to speculate on crypto. Oh yeah, he got involved in cryptos. He bought a fleet of Rolls Royces, a Ferrari. He
spent $1 million of it to sue Netflix.
Yeah,
that's gangster.
He spent money. He spent the money they sent him to sue Netflix. He had a spending spree that included $1.8 million for credit card bills, $3.7 on furniture and antiques, $900,000 on mattresses and luxury bedding.
So, building a hotel.
Yeah, geez, man. So he volcanic eruption knew a secret transmission mechanism for COVID-19. So yeah, he got arrested and he's facing 20 years in prison. All just my biggest question there is, okay, so they lent you this money expecting a product in return, and you used it all on yourself. How could you possibly think you're going to get away with this?
I'm kind of getting educated a little bit here too, because I didn't realize, unless it's just like a weird anomaly, I didn't realize that the director gets cut the check to go spend on everything.
Yeah,
I would have assumed that the studio pays for a lot of this stuff and arranges all of it, and the director just kind of is the guy in charge of everything once it's there. But it's wild to me that they're just like, here's 44 million, go spend it wisely.
About it too is they were like, hey, how's the show coming along? And he goes, great, I need $11 million more, and they gave it to him without showing them anything.
Yeah, and usually studios, like executives and producers, are there checking out dailies and stuff. So that's a really strange situation there,
Yes.
where either the movie industry does not quite work the way that I understood it to, or this was just a really strange anomaly, which I don't know. As wild as Netflix just pisses away money, it doesn't surprise me that
I
they're
know.
just like, here you go, we trust you, go make a show.
Yeah, and they just came out recently saying that they were going to spend what, like $5 billion or something this next year on content. So, and I mean, they threw three. Did you watch The Electric State by any chance?
I don't watch any movie from Netflix anymore unless I hear that it's great. I
That's
just kind of
fair.
got tired of them.
Yeah, man, because it's all, when they came out with this thing, I think it was a little bit earlier this year, later last year, where they said there was a report that said that Netflix executives are telling screenwriters to write into their scripts basically just to be background noise. Like,
yeah,
have people explain what they're doing. Say, I'm walking up to the door, I'm pulling my gun out, I'm going to shoot this person, so people can follow along while they're folding laundry. Yeah. And once I heard that, and I've watched a few of those Netflix movies since, I'm like, you can't unsee that now. Like, that's all that happens in these movies is they almost beat for beat are telling you exactly what's happening in the movie while it's happening, and they all are soulless. I think I said that they're basically Steven Seagal movies from the 90s with bigger budgets and bigger actors. This is what they've become.
Yeah, they've been made to fit an algorithm, basically. It's movie making by algorithm, where it's like, just make it decent enough to make somebody click and not click off, where every 15 minutes or so something happens where they don't feel like they're miserable and can have it happily on in the background while they're doing something. And I just refuse to watch movies like that, like, especially if they're outright just saying this is how we're making them. Netflix is the worst of them, where I used to ask for screeners all the time. I stopped asking for screeners for Netflix, and they're a pain in the ass with all that anyway, and they've lied to me multiple times, so I kind of have a bone to pick with them. But unless it's a movie like Rebel Ridge that comes out where they're like, nice. or Extraction, where everybody's talking about it, I'll happily click play. But I don't just give them my time anymore.
Yeah,
no matter what
was
adventure they get to star in it.
Yeah, what was the Hitman? I thought was really good too. But it's like, you got Glenn Powell and Richard Linklater, so it's like, I don't know how that movie's gonna suck. But so like someone was just saying here, it kind of sucks that Millie Bobby Brown is stuck to Netflix garbage, and I'm like, man, it is kind of a shame, because I think that girl has something going on, but every movie she's in is just some mediocre Netflix forget me in the next week sort of movie.
Well, she's kind of funny too, because like, she's very talented, but she outright said that she doesn't even watch movies either, which is just wild to me. I don't know how you can be an actress and not love movies, and like, how do you even decide what's a good project or not? And so I don't know. I feel like she's so talented, but I think that because of that alone, as well as her kind of being a Netflix brand, I think that her career might not have the longevity that we may think that it would have after Stranger Things ends sometime between now and my death.
Yeah. I was actually making that point. I was like, the first season of Stranger Things came out in 2016, and we're in 2025, and they haven't even released season 5 yet. That's just insane to me. I was like, we're going to be collecting Social Security checks by the time that freaking show ends. Severance too, kind of, because I mean, the first season to the second season was the 3-year wait, and that's my other problem with a lot of the streaming shows is like, there's no punishment really for waiting that long, because they'll come out, it hits the algorithm, and then a billion people are going to freaking watch it until the next thing comes around. So there's just no, like, back in the day when we watched our show, if no one watched it, they just canceled the damn thing. Now people will watch things and they'll just cancel the damn thing. Yeah. So it's hard to get into certain series.
It is. It's very weird. And I'm very gun shy about starting a new series, because it just feels like so much more of an investment than just turning on a movie. And so for a long time, my mindset, unless it was a show that I just was really interested in or grabbed me right away, or I had to watch it because it was just going to be something my audience wanted, most times I'll wait for a show to prove itself, because I'm always gun shy about starting a show, loving it, and then it gets canceled.
Yeah.
And there's been a lot of shows that have done that.
Recently, that happened with me with the, what was it? It's the Josh Brolin show, something Range. Home Range, or I can't remember. It was on Amazon. I was really liking it, and then they were just like, nope, you don't get to see how anything finishes in the show. It's just dead. But yeah, that was a shame. But all right, man. Well, I know we about reached that threshold. Thanks so much for hopping on today, Cody. It was great. Yeah,
man, I appreciate the invite. It was fun.
Of course, dude. We'll have you on again sometime soon. So for those out there, how could they follow you? What do you have coming up? Let's do that before we sign off.
Yeah, if you search Cody Leach, you should be able to find me pretty easily. But
Yep.
my little social media handle on most platforms is Cody Leach YT. So whether it's YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, you should be able to find me with that. I just dropped earlier today my ranking of all the things I saw at South by Southwest, massive video. So that'll be something to check out over the next couple of days. And then I got a lot of new releases coming. I'm probably still going to do some full reviews for a few films I saw at South by Southwest a little closer to their release date. So we're kicking into high gear now for when pre-summer season starts, and so it's just gonna be balls to the wall until November.
So were you able to fully review those movies after you see them, or did they have like any stipulations when you saw them at the time?
No, public film festivals, I've never had them give an embargo because it's not just critics that are there. People, just regular Joes, can buy tickets. So in that format, they don't have really the ability to have an embargo. And if anybody ever did, I would wonder why. I'd be like, this movie must suck.
Yeah, especially in the day and age of social media, that seems like just great publicity for those movies, especially if they're really good.
Yeah, well, that's kind of the purpose too. They want you to immediately start hyping things,
right?
But I just know from experience, like if I review Together today and it doesn't come out until August 1st, my video is gonna be hurt significantly. So that's one that I'll hype up for a little bit in some rankings, maybe some shorts, and then I'll do an actual review maybe the last week of July.
Okay. Awesome, man. Well, Cody, I really appreciate your time today, brother. Yeah, go follow him on all the social medias, guys. Keep killing it out there. I love your content. I'll I try to invest my time in the 26 minutes, but the 26 minutes is it's a commitment. But I love your content. Love what you're doing, man. Keep going out there, keep growing, and we'll talk to you soon.
Sounds great.
All right. Take care, everybody. Thank you.